the relationship between astrology and spirituality is inextricably linked. It's almost impossible to disentangle the two, in my view. And that's what this video is about. This video is about astrology, how it is spiritual, how spirituality and astrology can be mutually supportive as we are tasked with interpreting the heavens. This is ancient. The origin of astrological systems as a way to view the world and manage and understand reality is spiritual. And so you go all the way back to a text like Ptolemy. He says astrology offers an acquaintance with things divine and human. So the notion of divinity is embedded in the astrological theories, astrological justifications, the methods by which we go about our astrology have been and are embedded in concepts of the divine and of the spirit and have all the way back. It's always useful when having a conversation like this to define some terms. And so I like using plain language. I like pulling up dictionary definitions just to ground the conversation. And I've got here oxfordlearnersdictionaries.com, maybe the best dictionary, right? Oxford, English language comes from England. But you have here spirituality. This is how they define the noun. The quality of being connected with religion or the human spirit. Spirit, as a noun, defined as the part of a person that includes their mind, feelings, and the character rather than the body. So there's something about spirit that's intangible. The mind isn't something that we can really measure. I mean, you can put nodes on the brain and look at things on a computer screen, but can you measure the imagination or all of the chaos of the mental states, the way we feel? I think science doesn't quite have a grasp on the measurability and the tangibility of things that aren't strictly material in terms of like the body or the hair or the nails or something like this. But that's the definition of spirit, something that's not the body, intangible, mind and feelings, internal states. And then spiritual as an adjective, the same dictionary defines it as connected with the human spirit. So remember that intangible, internal phenomena, rather than the body or physical things. And so this is the key distinction that I think when I think about spirituality, spirit or spiritual, is that you're dealing with things not material, intangible, in realms unseen. And so let's just jump in here with another quote from Astrologer Vettius Valens, again, a very early part of the Common Era, so about 2,000 years ago. He writes, "Their devotion to this science, astrology, was so enthusiastic and so steadfast that they left the earthly sphere and walked the heavens, associating with the heavenly souls and the divine holy minds." And so again, he's writing here about some of the founders of astrology, developers of the astrological system. I think Nechepso and Petacyrus. In our astrological tradition, there are these kind of mythical astrologers that developed the system or downloaded the system. He's here writing about them, saying they were walking in the heavens with divine entities effectively. That part of the astrological systemic development was this connection to unseen divine realms. He uses souls and the divine here to describe the development of astrology as we commit to our astrological practice. And that's really the first point. It's embedded in the tradition as it's developed, one. And two, now if we come to the second point, that how does astrology then deal with the intangible? You know, it is, on the one hand, something we measure. So there's a physical manifestation of our system because it's measuring something that we can see with the eyes or with telescopes. On the one hand, it's physical and not spiritual, right? That's not spiritual to measure outer phenomenon. The spiritual side comes in when you start asking questions about what does it mean, the meaning making that astrology, that is required to have an astrology, because there's a two parts to astrology. One is the measurement, but two is the changes in the reality and the meaning that we take from those changes. You know, how we understand our lives as a result of processing a symbolic language, a symbolic matrix or a map that then informs our understanding of the self and of our lives. That component, that second prong of astrology, is the meaning-making side and the spiritual side. And you don't have an astrology without it, because if it was just a practice of measuring the sky, we just have astronomers for that. You just open up measurements. You can do astronomical work at the university. That would be not spiritual, right? That's extracting the spirituality and the meaning from the measurements we take from the sky. I tweeted this out at some point recently. Astrologers are in the meaning business. I was writing here about Pluto coming into Aquarius, the age of AI, how AI can generate language and it can get close to meaning, but the human being, where meaning is found in the minds and in the creativity of humans. AI might not be able to fully capture that in a way that human beings can, and that's why astrologers have a role to play in the coming period, because we are adept and experienced at producing meaning, experiencing meaning. In fact, it's fundamental. Our language, our ability to describe things, to be insular, to be contemplative, to be existential, distinguishes us from other animals. And that's a huge part of astrology, the idea of who am I, what am I, why am I here? And then we use the symbolic map to inform that meaning-making process. And just to go back to the definition of spirit from Oxford Learners' Dictionaries, they talk about spirit being the part of the person that includes their mind and feelings. So we're talking about inner states, inner processes. So next I want to turn to physicist David Bohm. He's a big physicist in the 20th century, the best education, worked with the best physicists that were of his day. His ideas were kind of rejected though, because he was trying to bridge spirituality and physics. And he's got this article, if you go to the David Bohm Society, their website, there's a lecture David Bohm gave in 1992, Science, Spirituality, and the Present World Crisis. Really cool lecture. In it, he talks about that the culture many thousands of years ago didn't have this separation from mind and body, external, internal. It wasn't fragmented in that way, and that science and spirituality were not separated. And then this quote from David Bohm, he says, well, what is spirit? And he goes into spirit means breath of life, right? So it's also tied back to the body. I can not even think about breathing, and there's some force that keeps me going. I'm not having to moment remind myself to breathe. That's intangible in a way. He says here, you cannot hold spirit in the hand. It is subtle. It is really the opposite of manifest. So it might be this unseen cause of the breath, right? These unseen forces that are embedded in the reality, similar to how the star's moving. There's forces that are moving these stars that are unseen. We don't know what those forces are. We have theories. We have the Big Bang Theory. They attach that label theory to it. All kinds of explanations that aren't certain. But it's difficult to hold the origins of what made this reality in the hand. It's subtle and it's not quite understood or known or seen. And then Bohm here writes, one important point we connect with spirit is meaning. And this is why astrology is about spirit, because it's about how we make meaning in the world. Bohm says that meaning has three definitions: significance, value, and purpose. And so that's what we do in an astrology reading. We think about what's the significance of an event, what is the purpose of our lives, that often comes up in readings, and then what are our values? How can we understand how we value things or value experiences or people, like in a synastry reading? It's all about making meaning, which according to Bohm is spirit, is the contemplation of spirit, and it fits with those other definitions that we were talking about earlier. And I think it's worth mentioning, Religions of the World. This is a book by S.R. Parchment, Astrology, Mundane and Spiritual, published in 1933. But he makes the point in this book, he talks about how the date of Easter, the greatest feast day in Christendom, is determined by the positions of the sun and the moon. So the religious practices are using this outer manifestation, that is to say the planetary movements and their measurements, to then inform these very strictly spiritual practices, which is religious ritual. We find meaning through, the groups that we associate with and the beliefs that we have. Belief itself is spiritual because it's intangible. You just say, I just believe it to be true. I don't know why, I just believe it. Or I see these evidence, but I don't know, I believe this. Belief is kind of the moment where the measured, tangible becomes spirit, because you have to take a leap of faith when you believe something. And maybe in a certain context, like I believe that this table is here and I'm touching it. Now some theoretical physicists might say the table isn't here, that most of these atoms are empty space. It can get quite strange when we talk about belief and what is real, but we're in the realm of the spirit then. And so the final thing I want to leave you with is this quote by probably my favorite astrologer that's living. There's a couple that I really love. Robert Hand is probably up there for me. I like Stephen Forrest. But Robert Hand just kind of takes the cake for me. He's just so awesome. I've had a chance to see his lectures live and see him work live. He's got a column on astro.com. It was republished there, originally published on Star IQ, an old website right at the turn of the millennium. But this article by Robert Hand, Astrology and Magic Differences, where he explores astrology and spirituality a little bit in this article. So he ends the article with this quote: "What is more dangerous, astrology and magic on the one hand, or nuclear physics on the other? What's more dangerous?" And he says here, the spiritual awareness, the wisdom of the practitioner, these are the key features of both astrology, magic, and science technology. Without these, both are dangerous to practitioners, to their souls, and to the lives of those around them. And this is the point I kind of want to leave you with as you are an astrology student or a practitioner or an enthusiast. I encourage you to accept the spiritual origins of our practice, explore what it means to you, things like, why am I here? What is the purpose of life? What is wisdom as you go through your life? What does it mean to embody wisdom and to deploy wisdom? Because without wisdom, and that's necessarily a spiritual phenomenon too, inner knowing about what is right or wrong, the ethics of something, we might say, is wisdom. That's essential when you're going to be advising clients, holding space with clients. People will come to you, and you're going to need wisdom to be able to interface and convey with your interpretation of astrological symbols as you deliver that to people. I want to encourage you. This video, the main message of this video is encouraging you to embrace spiritual traditions of all kinds. They're myriad, many all over the world. And come to some kind of path by which you can engage wisdom and meaning in your own life and in my own life, so that our astrology is potent and powerful, and that we can give the gift of meaning to those that we are engaged with astrologically, namely clients or the larger community. So don't run from spirituality. Don't run from the notions of spirituality in your astrology and in your life. And it's part of the core of what our field is and has been about all the way back.